Well, hello, my crafty friends. This is Christian, also known as Cardigans and Cards, and today I'm going to bring you another process video from playing Craft Roulette. We'll be focusing on episode 327. In my creative companion, I always do a little sketch of what I have in my mind after I hear what the parameters are. This week, we have to make an interactive card with the colors of summer and an element that here comes the bride, and then some ink edging. The only thing that really tripped me up was the element of here comes the bride. I really didn't want to make a bridal card. I didn't want to make a card for a bridal shower. I wanted to celebrate some old bride and grooms. So I decided to use the Old Fart couple set from Whimsy Stamps. To make my interactive card, I will be using the notched squares from Pink and Main. I'll be using the largest square. For the sentiment, I will be using the extra large sentiment strip dies from Pink and Main. Before sitting down to record, I did do a little pre-work. I pulled out of my stash a 5x7 card base that was already scored because I'm going to need that scored line later on when we talk about how do we make our window going through 3 panels of paper. I cut down 3 5x7 panels, one as a mat, one is my forward facing, and one was just a copy piece of paper that we're going to be utilizing for setting up a jig. I also had pulled out some paper for stamping up some images and then a sentiment strip. Finally, the star of the mechanism itself is some invisible thread or clear thread. You can also use some fishing line if it's clear, not the blue stuff. And you'll be able to make this simple spinner interactive. First up was the stamping. I needed to have my image stamped in alcohol-safe ink as I will be coloring with my Olo markers. After the image was stamped, I did do some heat embossing of the sentiment. The sentiment strip paper was prepped with an anti-static tool. And then I get out my powder and I start my heat gun because I want to limit the warping that it can occur on my paper itself. So my heat gun has little feet on it. So it's been getting warm this entire time. And all I have to do then after some embossing powder cleanup, because that goes everywhere, I'm able to heat my sentiment and melt that plastic beautifully so that I have an amazing sentiment and I don't have any warping to my paper. I cleaned up any leftover powder on my piece of paper and set it aside. And then it was time to do some coloring. While I speed through the coloring here, I want to talk a little bit about paper selection and how to up your game a little bit if you are new to crafting. For my card here today, I knew that I was going to be die cutting this old fart couple out, and they would have a white ring around them. With my card design, I knew that that white edge, as well as the back of this couple, would be seen when the card is open. So I wanted to make sure that I was using the same cardstock as my card base for doing my images. In this example, I am using Nina Classic Crest Solar White 80-pound cardstock because it's just a little bit lighter than the card base, which is the 110-pound Nina Classic Crest Solar White cardstock. By using the same manufacturer for the color of cardstock that I am using for my base and for stamping on, there will be no true discrepancies in the whiteness. A lot of times when you look at your white cardstock against other white cardstock, you're going to see that sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's gray, sometimes it has a little beigey tan tone to it, and they're all still considered white. So by matching your card stock to your card base, if it is going to be seen, is one way that you can up your game on your cards to make them look more put together and more professional. Another way that you can make your cards appear more cohesive is by using the same color tones throughout the project. When I was looking for my summer colors, I wanted to do a soft summer palette, and I found my piece of pattern paper that I have now pulled into the screen with me to say, hey, these are the color tones that I want to stay in. I want this to be soft. I want it to have a little more gray in it. I want it to have a little harshness taken out of it. My inspiration was a rose garden. So when I started doing my coloring, you will see that I used colors across both of the characters. So I used a blue-green on the husband or the groom, and then on the bride, I'm going to pull in a lighter tone, but of the same colorway. Or for example, with his little slippers, it's the darker color of her nightgown. So pulling in colors and making them consistent throughout the image is really going to pull the card together and give the tone and the color theory that you're looking for. I know big science words coming out here, but this is a great way for you to have an image that doesn't look halfway pieced together or a card that just doesn't quite look right. You know it, the colors go together, but they just weren't matching and it just didn't look put together. So sticking to those same colors across the multiple different foci will really put the card together and make you feel like you're an artist. I mean, I know you're an artist. I'm an artist too in my own way, but you know what I mean. If you're looking for the color combos used, you can see it in the description, or you can head on over to my blog and you can see that information there at cardigansandcards.com. It was now time to do some die cutting. For this card, I chose this stamp set on purpose because I knew I had a die that fit around my focal image that was going to be my spinner. I cut this from the image itself and then from a separate piece of cardstock because I will be using these two pieces to have a sandwich that my transparent or invisible thread will be going through. With the other elements ready, it was now time to start working on my window. So I pulled out my copy paper, my mat, as well as my pattern paper that would be the forward-facing paper. Using the large notched square die that will be my window, I did a practice run to see, does everything fit in here? Is there enough clearance for my little image to spin around? And that my sentiment and my layout matched what I was seeing in my head or on my sketch pad when I first started this design. When I was satisfied, I pulled out my piece of copy paper that was just leftovers from something, I don't know what, and I'll be using this to create a jig. I chose copy paper because I will be taping down the die to the paper and leaving that die attached for the entire time. Is this an excessive amount of tape? Hard to say. I just know that I didn't want it to tear or come apart because I will be using this to make my spinner window on my pattern paper, my mat, as well as my card base. I ran the piece of copy paper through the machine and now you can see I've made my own jig. I will line this up on the pattern paper and ensure that it is nice and straight because it's cut to the same dimensions. It should fit just perfect. I tape it in place and then run it through the machine. I will repeat this process for the matte card base as well. The centers from these cutouts will be saved for another project and then to use later on in the card. The final piece that needed to be cut out was my card base itself. So I grabbed my piece of paper and I will be lining up along that score line the actual jig. This will allow me to have this positioned in the correct spot. I will cut this off screen on my big machine just because it's a little easier. With the card base cut out, it was now time to score the paper. I worked the fold a little bit first, and then I will put it into the corner of my scoreboard to help keep those papers in place while I do the final burnishing of that joint. I want to make sure that that piece is nice and secure when I start to do my assembly. I'm a strong believer in learning from other people's mistakes, and here I am making a mistake. I was so excited about putting my card together, I started putting all the glue on the back of the paper and then went, oh no, wait, This isn't the time I do this. I haven't even got my string in there. What was I thinking? And aha, there's the moment. The nice thing about liquid glue is it dries and you just gotta not set something in it. So I try to find a safe spot for that to let it hang out until I am done and ready for it after I get my string on the paper. And this is also where I learned some other mistakes. We'll get to that in a minute. So for your string, you just need it to be long enough where you'll have an anchor at the top and the bottom of your open window. To adhere the string to the image itself, I used some really strong sticky adhesive and I made sure I covered a large area. So in case when I put the invisible string down that, you can't see it at all, did it actually get in the right spots? Great way to cover it, just put extra down. I then glued together my front and back pieces. So this not only had liquid adhesive, it had a glue tape in there as well, so that I knew there was a nice strong bond and that string was not getting loose. With the image all put together, I was so proud of myself. I'm like, look at me go, rocking it. And then I realized I forgot to stamp the back side of my image. I went ahead and stamped that with some pigment ink, and since I had some time to waste, I went ahead and harvested all of my sticky tape to use for another project. Now, finally, it was time to put the interactive element inside of my card base. I placed a double row of super sticky double-sided tape on the top small thin border to ensure that that string really had a place to stick. I repeated that also on the bottom section of my spinner element. So on that bottom part of the card, I did 2 or 3 layers of the same sticky tape. Before committing to my placement, I did a test run and made sure that again, I had my element where I wanted it. One by one, I then peeled back my tape to ensure that that string went in the right spot because, it's invisible, you can't see it. And I wanted to make sure that it was pulled taut between the top and the bottom section. Because I'm not the most graceful person in the world and I tend to drop stuff in glue because, why not make life difficult? I do put a couple pieces of the backer back onto the sticky tape while I assemble the rest of the card because I inevitably will drop something onto that sticky tape and you can't get it off. So regluing occurred of my mat. Because I was an overachiever and put the glue down the first time, my paper was a little textured and I was okay with that because this was my mat. Most of it was going to be covered up. But I did want to make sure that that really adhered, so I did throw some magnets on it just to add that little bit of pressure while I finished prepping the rest of the card. The pattern paper was trimmed on both sides to make the panel just a little bit narrower. I wanted it to be the same size as the regular card, just that trimming, so that I can also then put on some shiny gold accents. Okay, matte gold accents, but tomato, tomato, um, on that edge as well. The invisible thread was then trimmed, and it was time to take it for a test run to see if my mechanism worked the way that I wanted it to. The sentiment was placed on next, but first I had to meet one of the parameters of having inked edges. So I did go ahead and ink that with some brown ink. I don't know if you can read the sentiment, but it cracks me up. It's not easy being arm candy, but here I am, killing it. Some foam tape was applied to the back, and that was then popped up on the front of my card. With the die cut piece that was left over from when I created my window on the front of the pattern paper, I did some more ink edging as well as some ink blending. This will provide a contrast between the paper on the front of the card and the paper now going to be in the inside of the card. This also will have a spot that is deepened in color, so the characters really do pop when you put them on there. With the background now filled in, it was time to finish the front of the card. I trimmed down 2 gold pieces of paper. Who knows what size they are? I just kind of trimmed them off of the sheet of paper just to make little strips that went on both sides of my pattern paper panel. I then selected 4 gold. My card was finally complete and it was now time to test my card idea. So I wound up my little old fart couple by just twisting it one way over and over and over again to cause some tension on the string. While maintaining that tension, I shut my card as if I were mailing this to my recipient. I then opened my card and watched them spin. You can even read the happy anniversary. It worked perfectly. I still have room inside the card to write my sentiment to my recipient down on the bottom. So I have lots of space yet. Nice thing about 5 by 7 cards is you have a ton of real estate and you can always find a spot to place something. I believe I met all the parameters, but I have to get out my little companion to see did I actually get those parameters. First up, I take a look at my diagram. Is there anything that had any variations on that I need to capture so that if I want to make this card again, I can? Really no changes there, so let's just make sure I got my card done. I did an interactive card. Check. My colors are summer. They sure are. I did a muted rose garden. Check. Then my element. And here comes a bride. Well, I have a bride and groom have been together for a while. Great anniversary card. Check. And then finally, my random was some ink edging, and I did that on both my sentiment strip as well as my background panel. Then I did the once over to make sure I had everything written down so when I look at this card again, I can remember what I did because, my brain. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. So that is it, my friends. Mr. Wheel did not intimidate me. I mastered an interactive card with a Here Comes the Bride element. Like, hello. If you are enjoying my process videos with me trying to conquer the wheel, please hit the like button and hit subscribe. More to come, Mr. Wheel. You will never outsmart me.